Welcome to another episode of the SuperCoach Hub NBL series for 2023-24 season. I am Barnsey, your host for the episodes. And look, NBL round 10 now. We're already halfway through the NBL season. SuperCoach Hub has every sport covered, including NBL, with the first time doing SuperCoach for NBL. So it is a great season so far. We had the SuperCoach pleb over in Europe for a month and traveling, and he's back now, but he's not back on the podcast. But we do have the Fantasy Phoenix back from a couple of weeks ago. Chad, welcome back, mate. Hopefully you've been enjoying your NBL the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, thanks, Barnsey. Thanks for having me again. It was a pleasure to be on last time, so very happy to jump back on again. NBL has been going a little bit better. Obviously, for the Hawkies, we've had a win and a 1-point loss under the new coach. And in terms of fantasy, the fantasy scores, we're going pretty well.
Yeah, I found it to be a pretty tough round. I was 414, and that plummeted me. I dropped 200 spots, maybe 250 or something. So got from around 250th, I'm now 600th in the last fortnight. So been a couple of calculated moves from me where I thought I would drop a little bit, but last round, I got to say, the center spot just killed me. I ended up as well initially always wanting to get McCall in. And I went, no, I ended up getting Miller instead. And it didn't make that much difference, but I really should have just boosted and got them both in. And the other thing I decided was I was just going to start Magnay because I had 4 guys on double starting and a couple of guns on the bench in Creek and Doyle. And I just thought, you know what, center's just too hard, and it is a hard year for center. So I just left it, and that was a big mistake too. So how did your round shape up, SuperCoach-wise?
Yeah, pretty solid. It was a high-scoring round overall. I just missed out on cracking the 500 mark. I think I was 494 or 496. I ended up going for both Miller and McCall as my trade-ins. I was tempted to boost for Magnay for that cash gen, but didn't pull the trigger on that, which probably worked out okay last week. But yeah, going to have to look to move on him again soon. I think I jumped maybe about 40 or 50 ranks to get to about 170th overall. So hovering around the mark, but yeah, still a long way to go in this second half of the year.
Very, very nice, mate. I wish I was hovering. I've just dropped badly. The other one that I did too, I actually missed lockout because the New Zealand Adelaide game was early for the start of the round. So one of my moves as well was going to be, look, maybe I just go because the centre spot, like if I was going to solve my centre spot problem, it was going to be to get Wiley in. And he was pretty cheap, and he just killed it. And I was like, man, one of the trades I had copied on my phone that I screenshotted as an option was Wiley, McCall, and Miller, and leave Magnay. And I ended up couldn't go Wiley, ended up not going McCall because I got Magnay instead. So I had a center, and just all blew up. But we're on around 10 now, so that's a positive. But the non-positives. We got a couple of injuries, really one main injury to talk about. So we had Mola go down for the Phoenix on the weekend. And look, really unlucky for Mola, really unlucky for the Phoenix. He's been way better than I thought he was going to be for them. He's contributed. He's been a starter for them. Sad for him, but it does open up opportunity for the Phoenix to have a SuperCoach option starting for the rest of the year now.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, from last week, probably one of the main benefactors will be Matt Kenyon, who, to be honest, I'm surprised wasn't starting over Craig Moller for earlier parts of the year. But I think Moller just was performing a lot more consistently than probably would have thought coming into the year, especially after, he's missed nearly 2 years worth of time with knee injuries, unfortunately. But yeah, Matt Kenyon's definitely one. And even as I know that he's Iron Man that plays most minutes anyway, but even Creek, just his output should be even more potentially without that extra sort of 3-4 hybrid player in, taking extra minutes away.
Yeah, you just think that Williams and Creek are going to feast even more with Mola out because they don't have a roster with many bigger guys on the bench here that they're going to put in the rotation. So I think they're going to go a bit smaller. I think you'll see Williams and Creek as the two, the 5 and the 4 playing big minutes, and that's probably what it's going to shape out as. So we do get a good look this week because it's a single game week for the Phoenix, and then when they've got the back-to-back doubles from next round when we can target somebody going into that role. So certainly it's going to be a watch. Speaking about watch, we need to have a look at the trade market now from round 10, and big trade market because there's a lot of different issues. Strategy is going to really come into it now because we're halfway through the season. Centre is a big issue for teams, and it's also a big issue to make the decision on, are you going to go for money or are you going to go for points? And that's a decision that coaches are having to make this round as well. So having a look at the outs for this round, first of all, look, there's a couple that make a lot of sense, and then there's a couple I don't understand. So I'm interested in your feedback on it because Josh Bannon's an easy one. We talk about injuries. He killed me on the weekend. Started him instead of Creek, even though my gut said Creek. My head said the Bannon double. Just take the double game week. You got to do it. He scored 16 points in the first game, clutched his shoulder. I knew it was all over from then, despite them trying to be positive about it. I just knew that he was going to be ruled out for that Sunday game, and he was. So he looks like a must-sell to me. But I haven't even seen the timeline on him, to be honest, but surely there's no reason to hold him.
No, well, I think actually came out today that they're optimistic he might play in their game on Sunday, but with the delayed concussion as well as the actual injury where he's holding his shoulder as well, even if he does play, they're not going to risk him. So he's not. Surely he won't be a big impact player for it. They don't have a great schedule either. I'm pretty sure it's one double over the next 3 or 4 rounds as well. So you don't need to be worried about holding him for that. So yeah, I have him, and unless something really funky happens with the team, I'll be moving him on.
Yeah, he's first gone for me for sure. Jackson Cartwright and Anthony Lamb have been absolute pearlers this season. Great options. The 3rd and 6th best SuperCoach players for the NBL season on averages. And Lamb in particular lately, he's been a back-to-back captain choice for me the last 2 rounds in a row. It's interesting when we have NBL SuperCoach, you're trading the guys like this out. I have changed and chopped and changed several times on my thoughts on this. So at the start, or even just last round, looking towards this round before last round even kicked off, I was like, yeah, plan is we've got Sydney and Cairns are the 2 double teams this week. Those are the teams you want to stack up on for your starters. I'm going to trade Lamb and I'm going to trade Cartwright, and that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense, though, because in some ways you think about it and you go, look, you've got to hold some of these guys, and if they're some of the best options, and over the last few weeks, Lamb has arguably been the best SuperCoach player you could have. So maybe that's someone you should keep. And then when you have a look a bit deeper, positional scarcity is a thing, and we've seen it at centre to the nth degree. There is no centres. So when you try and play around and be smart and get guys that are really average, but they've got 2 game weeks instead of an Alan Williams, you just get burnt. And that's what happens. Now, forward spot isn't as bad, but we do know that there's a plethora of guards. There's so many guards, it's not funny. And you can always get rid of a Jackson Cartwright and get someone equally as good in. At the forward spot, it's a lot more open. So I question whether you can get anyone near as good as Lamb in there, let alone 2 guys that you're going to start. So for me, I've actually turned around a little bit on this one and said, you know what, if I can, I'm going to try and hold Lamb and I'll get rid of Jackson Cartwright. And I think a lot of teams can. So I'm fine, Chad, for people to be trading these guys out, but I'm not sure they should be traded out at the rate that we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, I was in a similar position to you, Barnesy. I had them both penciled in as move-ons this week. But if the schedule was a little bit different, it'd be a lot easier to say if the Kings had 3 doubles in a row or something, it's easy to move them both out for, say, a Hogan and Adams. But yeah, you're right with that scarcity. The center spot, and even a lot of the guys that are good center options are also forward options too. So having a solid forward in Lamb that, as you said, has been essentially the best SuperCoach player over the last few weeks, it's a good hold if you can. But if it allows you to get really solid moves and plan for the next few weeks, I'd be happy moving him on. But I think with my current plans, I'll be keeping Lamb on the bench and trading out Jackson Cartwright.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. And I think that we've seen Lamb be able to put up 40 to 50 points in a game. And that's enough to hold him. And they've got this week Tassie, but it is at New Zealand, so it cancels out a little bit of how hard that matchup could be for them. They then have
Lamb
a really tough...
sorry, Barnesy. I was just going to say Lamb actually had a really solid game. He had, I think, 48, 49 the last time they played Tassie. So he's definitely shown a ceiling against them as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You're right. I forgot about that. So he absolutely killed him in that game. And then Cairns is a really tough travel next week for them. Going from New Zealand to Cairns on the road, that's hard. Now, after that, they've got a double in a week that everybody's got doubles, but still it's a decent doubles. They've got the Kings, but it's at home for them. And then they have a rest all the way until the last game of the round where they hit Brisbane. and that's a pretty good matchup for them. So I would just say to teams, probably think about it a little bit and don't think that you've got to get rid of these guys. Mango, yep, get rid of him. Wardenberg, tell you what, he has been so disappointing, and he's made me. I've had egg on my face for a couple of weeks with him. I don't even own him, and I've never owned him, but I've still told people, look, don't just get rid of him. Think about it, okay? Because if you're not going to get a gun like Alan Williams in at centre, then what are you doing it for? Because he's got 2 game weeks. Even if he has an average game like he has been, it's still 2020. You're going to get 40 for the round. And then he gets benched on the weekend. Roberts looks amazing, and he just absolutely stinks it up. So Wardenberg's now only $12,000 above his starting price, so it's put owners in a really tough position. But it looks like, Chad, that you've probably just got to cut the rope and just get rid of him.
I think so. This has been, he's been a thorn in my side for weeks and weeks and weeks. I've been doing the same thing, telling people, you know what, just hang on to him. Even if he's pretty average, he's going to score similarly to the guys on singles anyway with all the doubles. But I think last week with how well Roberts performed is probably the last nail in the coffin for Wardenberg.
Yeah, I do too. And we'll talk about Roberts, but Roberts passed the eye test, and Wardenberg just is flailing a little bit now and had foul trouble on the weekend too. So there's, I understand people getting rid of him. It's just it's a hard one, because I think that if I owned him, I would get rid of him. But I would also just keep in mind your expectations. And a lot of SuperCoach, regardless of the sport, is actually expectations. And your expectations need to be, look, in 2 weeks, Wardenberg could have a negative break even again and be starting again. That could happen. So just know that might happen as an option, so you're not too upset if it does. We've got Nathan Sobey. He needs to go. Kyle, Gak, Norton. Uninteresting, uninspiring trade-outs that should be happening. Will Magnay, last week's most popular player, who has a -6 break even still, who has a double next round, is getting traded out. I don't get it. Can you explain it to me? What is the market doing here?
I got no idea. I wish I could answer that question. I don't know. He, as you said, negative break even, back-to-back doubles after this week. I don't understand. He's someone that I know a lot of people have been burnt by in fantasy in the past, but for the SuperCoach game suits him. Blocks are really incentivized. He's like the best blocker in the league. As he builds more fitness, more strength, and more conditioning, he should only play more minutes, especially with Marcus Lee hasn't exactly been on fire lately either. I don't know. If I had him, I'd definitely be holding him. I almost boosted for him last week, actually, so I can't see why he's in the top 10 for most traded out players.
Well, it's also one of those things where he's got the dual centre forward, so you can throw him at forward if you need to, and that dual stuff's going to be so handy, because there's going to be teams, if it hasn't happened to already, when it's happened to plenty, where you're going to be stuck because you can't move around players to get all your double guys starting, and you end up starting 3 out of your 5 double guys because you can't get the other 2 on the court. Having those duels is heaps important, and he is a duel, and he's someone who is going to make money. He's guaranteed money this week. And you could, with the break even that he will have going into next week, being a double round, he's just about guaranteed to make money next week. So you could be leaving 30, 40K on the table pretty easily. And he could also easily, being Magnay the Enigma, bust out and have a 6-block game, and then all of a sudden he's making money for 4 weeks. It's just a really easy hold, and I wouldn't even think about selling him. If you do have a center problem, which I do, trade everyone else. Trade your forwards, trade your other center, because you've got lots of people to trade, right? So teams really shouldn't even be stuck needing to get him out for a center even.
No, I don't think so. And as you brought up, he could have those big games where he has lots of blocks, he doubles. Or even in his short comeback this year, he's shown a very high ceiling already. Of all the guys you could trade out, I have no idea why Magnay would be at the top of your list for that. But hold for me, and I'm still tempted to potentially boost to maybe bring him in either this week or next.
Mm-hmm. Josh Roberts, number 1 most traded in player. Very unsurprising. He's gone up a little bit so far, but still only 121,500. So he's very cheap, and he's got a nice break even of a -10. So on the weekend, he obviously had the 2 games, but throwing up 51 points across those 2 games. And in particular, it was that second game that the energy that he had and how he played, and the faith that the coach put in him, sort of said to me, look, he's passing the eye test, he's passing all the other tests as well. And I can't see him losing that role now, at least for the the short-term future. Now, we say that, but you mentioned to me off this recording that Ford said, well, our rotation's not set. It just depends on what guys are going to step up on the day and how they're going to perform, and then that'll dictate the rotation, basically. That's a worry. Now, it's not like it's a big deal. And what I will say is this is one of those things where we mentioned it before. Do you want money or do you want points? Because if you just want money at his price, it's not going to matter. Anything can happen, and he's still going to be a good trade. The problem is that if you're going to do 2 trades this week, you can't get everybody in. So you get Roberts in as one, you're going to sacrifice points in that spot. So I think there's plenty of teams, me included, like my team, I'd love to get Roberts in. Can't afford to. I need points. I need it now. So I'm going to get in a Kings player and a Cairns player, with McCall and one of the Kings guns, because I'd rather do that than have Roberts in their place and get some extra money that I'm going to have sitting in my bank account at the end of the year when I finish like 5,000. So get the points now, get your ranking now is what I reckon with guys like Roberts. But, obviously, Chad, maybe teams are already set up. Maybe teams got Kings players in last week, and maybe they've got McCall and they've got Miller. Those teams should go for their life and get Roberts in, probably the best cashy along with Magnay that we're going to get this mid-season period.
Yeah, I think so. He is low risk, high reward in the fact that with his such a low price, he's less than half the price he started the year at with how, the few minutes he's played so far. But his ceiling, not necessarily just in SuperCoach points, but we saw in preseason in those the NBA, NBL games and what he did against JLA last week. You can't see any reason why he wouldn't be their starting big man and performing well. With their schedule to come, the only other thing that could be an issue is, as you mentioned, we've only got those 2 trades. I mean, unless you boost, but a lot of people are loaded up on Cairns guys as well. Like myself, I have 6. That's not including him. So I wouldn't necessarily want to bring him in unless it was for, say, a Wardenberg. But then are you really gaining all that much in that trade that could be spent, as you said, attacking the points, going towards one of the Kings guys or something like that? So definitely a solid trade option, and I'm not surprised that it's popular. It could really set up the cash gen moving forward.
Yeah, it should be hugely popular. And if you're desperate for cash, get him. If you don't need the cash, then I would look towards the points and chase the points, of which there's plenty of good options. The second guy on the list, Jalen Adams. Jalen Adams, I was in my initial plans. He's 360,700. He is already owned by 9% of teams, and he's had a solid season, 32.3 points per game. He's right up there with some of the top guards that you can have. He's got a good double this week, obviously. So they've got Cairns, and then they've got Phoenix. It's looks like a good week for Jalen Adams. I think it's a fine trade-in. He has stumbled the last few weeks a little bit, it has to be said. I should say the last couple of weeks before last week. So against Perth, he was great. Cotton lit him up. So great is relative to, your SuperCoach points that you score, I guess. But in real life, he got lit up. But other than that, he scored 36 points against Perth, which was quite a good effort, considering the 2 weeks before he went 13 and a 32. And I'm trying to remember if round 7 was a double game week, because I feel like he had a real stinker. No,
that was so he's only gone under 30. I think it is in that one game where he got that 13. So he hasn't been at his MVP year performance when you convert those scores over, but he has been very, very solid. But yeah, he's been solid without being spectacular. He's one of those guys. We haven't seen that massive ceiling score.
Yeah, he started off with a little bit like round 2 and 3. You got a glimpse of his double game weeks with a 68 and a 70, and he had another one in round 6 with 69. I think the last few weeks, the thing that's thrown me a little bit with him is Hoag's back the last few weeks, and I think that he's really hit his straps. But I still really like Jalen. The thing that really threw me is his efficiency, right? Like the game before last, he had 5 turnovers and shot like 20% from the field. It's just the negative stats are there, and it's going to be a big deal for him. But I still think he's a great option. What I will say is one of the other guys on this list is Hoag, and I'm interested in your input on this because this was my decision, right?
Yeah.
I was going to get Adams, and then I went, you know what? I've got all these guards, and Adams is probably going to be – I thought he was higher than 9% before I looked. I thought he would have been 12% already or more, but I think he's going to be 15 to 20% owned by the end of this trading period. and that's high. Whereas someone like Hogue can probably do just as well, and he's about the same price, and he's a forward, which, as we talked about, is a much scarcer position, and he could outdo him even. And he's someone who is owned by only a few percent of coaches at the moment, and will be under 10% by the time trading finishes this week, even if he gets popular. So Hogue had a 40 on the weekend as well, which was really impressive against Perth, and he did it pretty. Like, he looked good, but it was just the efficiency. You know, he's like 20 and 7, 3 or 4 threes, no turnovers. And it's like that.
Yeah.
That efficiency is showing me that Hogue's like real. He's back. You know, he had a long layoff. He didn't start till round 5. I think he's back now, and that sort of efficiency and point scoring is what you're going to get. And I really like that at the forward spot when we've got all these other guards sitting there as well. So, look, Adams is great. Hogue's great. I can't really separate them. I'm just having a guess. I'm going to go Hogue for my team. For other teams, I think Jalen Adams is going to be fantastic too. Both of them should average 30-plus points a game. You're probably looking at a 60-plus week for both, I reckon. When you're having a look at some of these other Kings, though, Jonah Bolden's the third most trading player. He was, 5 of 5 threes at the half last game?
Yeah. Then follows it up with an air ball. I don't know how you go.
Well, I mean, he was value a couple of weeks ago, and Hunter came back as well, and that was always one of the red flags on the weekend, because we didn't know last week at this point, is Hunter back this round or not? He was, and then Bolden killed it still anyway, but he just went up 30K. He's now 277,000, and playing off the bench, his per minute production is phenomenal, Chad. Like, his per minutes is great. And last month of basketball, you can see it. You know, 29, 32, 28, 34. And the last 3 in particular, he's averaging 32 points a game in singles. So he's putting up the points anyway. But you got to remember that 2 out of those 3, I believe Hunter was out for both of them. And that's a big deal for me. And Hunter only played 16 minutes on that game on the weekend. And that's a bit of an issue, because a week later you expected Hunter's going to play 20 plus minutes, and that's going to eat into Bolden. We got Noy out last weekend as well. It's just, I don't like it at the price. You know, I think that if you had to have a throw at the stumps for a cheaper guy, there's some other options that I would do that are just not going to be close to 300K, because that's gun money. Like, to me, you find more of a semi-gun, someone who's starting. So I've heard you mention Bolden. Are you still considering him for this week?
I am, but that's probably mainly because of the Bannon injury. If Bannon wasn't in that situation, then it would be looking at Adams and Hogue. Actually, I had a look. I'm about 8K short of doing Bannon and PJC to Adams and Hogue. So that is disappointing.
That's a killer.
Yeah,
perfect trades.
It was. I looked at it, and then I quickly looked in my head. I thought, this is going to be close, but not quite. But you listening to what you're saying there, you're 100% right. There's been key guys out, and even taking it back a step further, in his first game that he went off a little bit, and some of his games earlier in the year, Jalen Galloway was out too. So that's another piece that they've got to fit in that can take away boards and defensive stats too. I think he played so much in that game against Perth, as you mentioned, because of how hot he was. You know, what he finished 6 of 7 or whatever, 6 of 8, whatever he finished on. No matter how efficient you are, he's not going to do that every week. So, he's definitely still a consideration just to the price point of where I can get to for that extra Bannon move. But if you're looking at a cheaper Kings guy, there's people like a Tui or even Galloway himself. If we saw early in the year when Galloway's at his best, he is elite, like ridiculously value and output. So it'll be interesting. Their sporadic schedule too, double, single, and then the couple of doubles makes it a little bit trickier. But I don't think it's a bad trade-in, but you probably have better options elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm the same. And look, he could be, like he showed on the weekend, he could be really hot, and he just could keep continuing with some great form. And that's the other side of the story. You know, Bolden spent some time out. He's got a few months back into him in basketball. Maybe this is him hitting his form, and maybe he's going to force himself to be played minutes because he's just too good talent. You know, that could happen too. But to be honest, I feel a bit dirty talking about it, SuperCoach dirty, but I looked at Jordan Hunter before him because I just sort of thought, if I need a cheap center, you know, Jordan Hunter's 227,000. It's a $50,000 discount. And he looked good in games before he got injured. the scoring, wasn't necessarily great, but it was, 25, 38 in a double week. But he was sort of mid-20s to 30-ish on the single weeks a lot of the time. And I just sort of thought, you know what? At his price tag at 227K, maybe he's an option at centre, but he's got a 43 break even. So I've just decided to sort of stay away from him. But I think the unspoken about guy that everybody's looking at, but people don't want to really talk about and say they're looking at as much, I think, is Valentine. And he's the guy for me because he's got that guard forward duel, which I really love. And he hasn't been fantastic. He's still in the top 10 most trades, though. And he's 290,000. So, I mean, to me, Chad, Valentine and Bolden are almost the same price. They're both forward eligible. I'm going for Valentine every day of the week because he's starting and he can get his points in so many different ways.
Yeah, he's a good facilitator. I think it's probably me being stubborn. Did I start with Valentine or traded him in that second week? I can't remember when the Kings had that first double, but yeah, I went him as my Kings guy, and he just didn't really hit his strides. But then in the last probably 5 or 6 weeks, he's done fairly solidly. So it's probably more me being stubborn, going, he burnt me a little bit. I don't know if I can go it, but no, he's definitely a good option. Stuffs the stat sheet. He doesn't need to do what a Bolden did and go 6 of 8 from deep to get his points. He go near triple double. I think in 5 or 6 of his games so far. So very solid option. And if he's who you're looking at, that eligibility, especially with people like McCall has got the same eligibility, or people have got Bull Quoll, or even a Sam McDaniel, switch them all around depending on the doubles. He's good to keep over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself because I think that you're right to be a little bit skeptical because he's got that inconsistency in him. On the weekend, his stat sheet looked good, but he only had 18 points for SuperCoach. The 2 weeks before were fine, 37 and 23. And then in round 6, a double game week of 48. He's averaging around 25 points a game, which is decent, but not great. But he does have that ability to go in a bit of a hot stretch. And we've seen that before. You look at the first 4 rounds of the year. I think people expected maybe too much with his adjustment to the NBL, but he went 36, 44, 40, and 38. And, it's a pretty decent offering, and he was averaging around 30 points a game at that point. So I think he can get back to that. I think that we might see it, but you have to be aware of that downside, don't you? Because he does have that lower games in him.
Yeah, that floor is the scary part where you look at I know he's significantly cheaper than someone like a Jalen Adams, but yeah, you don't need to worry about that floor with someone like that.
Yeah, so you'd be in agreement that Adams and Hogue are both great options, and the riskier options are guys like Valentine and Bolden. And that's why I say, like, even though I really like Valentine, I like him relative to Bolden because Bolden's obviously got that downside, and I just think that he's got more downside. So I'd probably rank the Sydney options as Hogue, Adams, and Valentine. Valentine's a distant third. Are you pretty much on the same belief?
Yep. Yeah, I think. Yeah, like I mentioned, depending on what you're going for with those first two, the ceiling of the Hogue or the floor of Adams. But yeah, they're definitely daylight until the next lot of guys. Especially with how deep that roster is, you don't know. There'll be games where an Alex Tui goes off, and one where a Galloway goes off, and Bolden the next. So it's hard to pick. Aside from the two key guys.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at the matchup too. Like I think everybody's right to be going for Kings players, and obviously we both are. So we'd hope that we're right. But the first game is Cairns, and it's a travel game for them. Now I don't rate Cairns hugely, but they showed on the weekend that they were killing it on the weekend. That first quarter, they blew the game out of the water. And traveling to Cairns is hard for everybody. It's a hard travel from Sydney, and Sydney versus the Phoenix, it is at home, but the Phoenix are a very good side too. So I think we're in a spot this week where, again, we talk about expectations. Everybody should be trying to get Sydney and Cairns guys. I think a lot of people have Cairns guys. So it only leaves Sydney. But it doesn't mean that Sydney are a slam dunk, going to have big scores everywhere because the double game week does it, because it isn't the easiest draw they could have.
No, and as I mentioned with how their schedule's spaced out, they don't have those back-to-back doubles until I think it's around 14 and 15. It's double this week, then single, then double, then single. So, yeah, they're not exactly going to be that kind of smash picks because of the schedule either. It's you wouldn't want to load up too heavily, but definitely want to invest one way or another, especially for this week.
Yeah, and aiming for the top guys, I think, is your best bet if you can get them in, because they're easier holds as well, and you'd want to hold those top guys through to that those other doubles that you're coming. McCall and Patrick Miller. I have Patrick Miller. I don't have McCall. I will have McCall this week. I'm going to go out on a limb here, Chad, and say, to me, McCall is my number one trading option this week over any Kings players or anyone. And
Yep.
I really liked him last week. I'm really dirty on myself for talking myself out of it. But I think when we talk about things like the eye test, he just looks so good. And he's getting steals. I think he's got like 10 steals in the last 3 games. And he's transitioned with getting steals and just going and doing dunks or running ahead and having Miller be able to pop it over to him in transition for easy layups. It's there. His shooting was good on the weekend. He's hitting threes. He's just the whole package. And he's so active for them. It was ridiculous on the weekend how well he was playing in patches. So at 8% ownership still, like he's still not highly owned, and he's only got a 35 break even. 367,000, you could argue his value. Like he's probably a 400k player at the moment if he keeps going how he's going.
Oh, for sure. I think last week or the week before he was say 320, like, or around that. And you're like, that's his floor. He ain't getting any cheaper than that. He's been a really good performer in years past as well. I said it about Valentine and a couple other guys, but he stuffs the stat sheet. Like you said, with the steals, he's always active. Not even just those getting in the passing lanes, but I saw over the weekend multiple times where he's getting the wraparound steal and just the knockaway steals. Like he's so active. And even though they've got 3 good facilitating guards, they all somehow still seem to pitch in for getting those points and assists and whatnot. So McCall's ceiling on that team, I mean, probably sounds silly to say after what Patrick Miller did in that second game, but McCall's ceiling is just ridiculous. He's one of the other guys you could have as potential triple-double watches as well, or at least double-double when he's getting either rebounds or assists. But yeah, he's a very big trade-in. I brought in Miller and McCall last week, and they still have 4 doubles in a row. And the two best guys on the best schedule team, you can't not have them.
Yeah, you've got to get in on there now as well, because I think that a lot of us, including me, the last 2 weeks leading up to this, have sort of put it off going, there's plenty of doubles to get on them still. You're going to start to lose too much value now. You've got to get on them now where they've still got a month of doubles to sort of foundation your team for the next 4 weeks of basketball. And it's easy enough to do it at 367,000. It's harder to do it when he hits 400, and that could be happening very soon. Yeah. He's got 89 last round and 62 the round before in his 2 doubles. His floor's 30 plus at the moment with McCall per game. It's just, and then you look at this round, Chad. The Kings is a tough one, but it's at home, like I said. And the other thing too is that then they have Adelaide, and that's the big one for me, and that's why I've got them as a higher priority than Kings players, because McCall against Adelaide, like Adelaide were terrible on the weekend. It was unbelievable how bad they were. And the thing that stuck in my head was the post game when they're all whinging about the travel and the schedule and stuff. I'm thinking, what sort of culture and attitude do you guys have over in Adelaide at the moment? Because I don't think that shows that it's very good. And if that's the case, you see some teams that get embarrassed and they sort of bounce back. I don't know if Adelaide have that in them. So I really like, Cairns players versus Adelaide this week.
Especially a coach like Adam Ford too. He'd be one of those real, put the foot on the throat, really go hard at him. And we are speaking of that game too, even though it was a massive blowout and they didn't play the full on minutes that they probably would, but Crawford and Doyle, they absolutely dominated him as well. So if we can look at similar outputs from Miller and McCall or higher, very solid options this week.
Yeah, that's a great point about Doyle and Crawford too, because they did look good versus them. So, yeah, it's and McCall's my number one guy this week, and I think that Miller. People were disappointed in Miller with that first game, and he's in the top 10 most traded in now too. But I really think that you need to get on both of those guys. And Miller showed in that second game, like he was so disappointing in the first game, but then he throws up a massive second game and ends up on 86 points for the round. Like that was him and McCall both throw up near 90-point rounds. Absolutely huge. So I see them both as just about must-have guns at the moment. So, you probably feel about the same as Miller. Like if you've got McCall, you get Miller in, and if you got Miller, you get McCall in first, and vice versa.
Yeah, definitely so. They're, like I said, especially with them both, they've got 4 more weeks of the doubles in a row, And then obviously their schedule does taper off quite significantly. But of all the Cairns guys, they're the two that you could potentially look to hold and shift around. Like we were speaking earlier about guys like Lamb. They're in similar positions as well. But they both stuff the stat sheet. They're both very high talent players, and they're playing in a high octane system where they're the two guys that are probably going to get the most minutes and have the most impact.
Yeah, 100%. They're probably Cairns is probably one of the few teams where they rely so heavily on their top two guys. They don't have other guys that are really going to pitch in and come out and have a 25-point Bolton explosion in the first half or something. They just don't have that. It is on those two guys, and they know it. Ulbrich is getting traded in. Really interesting because he's getting traded out massive for 3 weeks. -5 break even. Look, I've been on the Ulbrich bus for a long time, and I got off it 2 weeks ago, and I think I'm just going to get the train next time because that bus sucked, and I just I've just got no inclination to get back on it again. Even with a -5 break even, it's not a big enough break even with his output and opportunity for me to bother. And I just have to ask, with those people getting Ulbrich in, are they not getting Roberts in? Because you're not going to get both, and if you want cash, you get Roberts in, and if you want a centre, you get Magna in. So I understand he costs hardly any money, but to me, it's probably just not really worth it at this point of the season.
No, I don't think so. They have that incredible run to finish the year, but just looking now, so they've got 3 singles, then 1 double, and then another 2 singles before they start their big run. If he starts doing really, really well under Tatum and gets to push up, even when they have their double in 3 weeks' time, surely he's only going to be like 140 at the most, even if he gets there. So yeah, he's not someone I think you have to jump on now. I certainly wouldn't be looking in that direction, even as a Hawks man that hopes he does really well.
Well, it's just such an important week because you've only got 2 teams on doubles. Like it's going to be hard to score, so you can't get guys like Ulbrich in. It's not worth it at all. Alan Williams, he's on a single and he's totally worth it. He's one of my trades. I'm going to use my boost so I can get Williams in. It's probably going to be a Williams, Hogue, and McCall week for me, which is some pretty big
guns coming in.
Yeah, I banked about 160K last week, so I'm ready to go. But look, Williams is 427,000. It really stings paying that much money, but he's only got a break even of 16. They've got a double next round, and they've got a double round after that. So you have to have him next week. At the centre spot, it's Williams, Daylight, Luala Chul, the most daylight you've ever seen in your life, and no option after that. It's just terrible at centre. And it's one of those things where when you look back on your SuperCoach season so far and assess it like I am, I've gone, you know what mistake I've made, number one, is that I've stuffed up the centre spot because it is just so bad. I should have just kept Alan Williams there the whole time because there is nobody else really near that level. Alan Williams on the weekend in his single chat threw up a 47-point game, near triple-double. It's only going to get better for him with Moeller out and with the doubles coming. So to me, I think that he's a set and forget for the year now. You just get Alan Williams in at centre and you don't move off him.
Well, they've got, I think 4 doubles left to go. But when he's putting up double-like scores in his single game weeks, like he's essentially outscoring Wardenberg, who's been on the doubles for however long and still got that to go. And he's doing it in half the amount of games. The only thing is just how much cash it ties up. That's the only where I'd be hesitant to do it as well. Definitely, like you said, you've definitely got to have him for those 2 doubles. If he's not the number 1 captain option, I'm mystified. But yeah, you need to have him for those. But I thought about it too, bringing him in early. It's just going to be hard to have that extra bit of cash, especially if I kept Lamb, to have that extra bit of cash, whether it's on the bench or starting. But with the situation where you're at and a lot of teams, I think it is a good move to have him early. And as you said, just have that set and forget. It's big men. It's like Ruckman in your AFL. Like a lot of the time, the best ones, you just sit him there, leave him there. I know we have doubles in this game, but yeah, he's performing well enough when he's on singles that he can just be kept in that spot.
Who have you got at centre at the moment? Who's your starting centre?
I've had Wardenberg. So yeah, he's been a big thorn in my side. And then the last few weeks I've had Saar. I did alternate them, I think, when Perth had that double and when at the same time as Cairns. But yeah, it's been those 2 guys. After I, like yourself, got off the whole brick bus, he was my backup for a while. But yeah, next week it'll be Williams in there, and then yeah, we'll have to wait and see. It's hard. The Wardenberg has just been killing me.
Oh, he's a killer. I got Pinder in 3 weeks ago, and that was Williams to Pinder, and that's the worst trade I've made all season. Williams to Pinder was terrible, and I could have just kept Williams, and it would have been much better points-wise and trade-wise and money-wise. But look, I think, Chad, to summarise on Williams, I think he's a good option this week for teams that don't have a centre. You may as well just go to him now. But if you do have a serviceable enough centre, then you're going to get your 25 odd points from, then fine. But I think that you have to be planning ahead to get Williams in next week as a must trade in. So whether it's this week or next week, you got to get Williams in surely.
Oh yeah, he's if you don't have him, he's probably going to be the biggest priority trade in all season next week if you haven't got him. But yeah, it's a very good point you bring up. If you do have someone half decent, or even if you've already got like a Hunter, a Bolden, one of those guys, you can play them this week and then look to bring him in next week. But I can see why the temptation is there to jump early when he's going to be an extra 20K next week if he performs how he probably should.
He's going to be the most expensive player by maybe 50,000 in the game next week. Jacob Wiley is a centre option who I was getting in last week until I missed out on the 5:30 game lockout. He went up 33,000 this week. Don't like him as much now, funnily enough. He's now a lot more expensive. So 263,000, not on a double game week. He's got to break even a 7. I thought he looked really good last week. Scored 60 points both games. He was very solid, and that's kind of been my take on Wiley when he's healthy and he's balling. He's just really solid, consistent 28, 30-point game. And he did that with a 60 on the weekend. But getting a single this week against Cairns and then a single versus Melbourne the following week and then a single versus Brisbane the week after, look, it's not the worst matchups, but it's not good. And it's 3 singles in a row. So I don't think at a 7 break even, it's worth it. And, it doesn't get spoken about as much in NBL SuperCoach, but I know it does in AFL and NRL SuperCoach where chasing points is brought up, and this is quintessential chasing points for me.
Oh, yeah, definitely so. Like if you're right, he has been fairly solid the last, 2-3 weeks at least. But if you're going to go for someone in that position, why not go, 30K cheaper and get a Magnay who's got 2 doubles next week and a better break even? Or even if you're going to go real basement, go like a Roberts who is less than half the cost and has that, the run of doubles and the ridiculous break even as well. So I don't understand this one, but maybe it's Adelaide fans that were like, hey, he was one of our shining lights in terrible performance. So I don't know, but I wouldn't be doing it. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's chasing last week's points for me. Like, it was a great trade last week. Doesn't make any sense this week. So I don't think so. Moving right along, out of the trade market, was there any other players for this week that aren't being traded in that you kind of like the look of?
It only if you're going those sort of cheaper options, like a couple of guys I mentioned before, Alex Tui, or if Jalen Galloway is going to be back to full minutes and full playing time, basically, there are a couple of guys you can look at from the Kings. Cairns, I don't think so, especially when you can look to move out guys from Cairns like a Wardenberg or as we see, Bull Quoll is in the top 10 trade outs as well. But yeah, it's only really they're 2 guns, and if you want to go cheap for the cash from Roberts, and that's it for the doubles this week, then you're only really looking at guys to set up for the next couple of weeks, which, as we talked about with Williams, you could make that trade early, or someone like a Magnay could make that trade early. But yeah, I don't think there's anyone major that sort of stands out unless you want to have a punt on one of those cheaper Sydney guys.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And when we're talking about captaincies this week, it's a real shallow pool, so it's going to make it not as interesting because everyone's going to go for the same guys. To me, it seems really simple that there's 4 options, right? There's Adams or the pod option Hogue, or you've got the call between McCall and Miller. And I'm actually finding myself gravitating to McCall, Miller, one of those 2. They're probably my 2 because they've got that Adelaide matchup.
Yeah, I think that's where I'll head. It's essentially the same as last week. Just sub out the Sydney guys for the New Zealand guys. Last week it was those 4, the Lamb PJC with the Cairns guys, and yeah, I think you can't even say probably go to Hogue or if you want to chase the ceiling, because we've just seen Miller was 1 point off matching Cotton for the best output all year on Sunday, and McCall has just been that consistent, and he seems to only be building as well. We're both putting up 80+ scores. That's where I'm looking. I think it's hard to go against Miller after that incredible game, but McCall, it's surprising. I thought it would have been the other way around, Miller being consistent and McCall having the high ceiling. But yeah, one of those two will be mine for sure, even if I do bring in one or both of those Kings guys.
Yeah, and look, I think it's very short odds that one of those 4 players is going to be the top scoring player. It's just a matter of which of those 4. Yep. And certainly if you're a lower rank, I would advise people to, if you can't decide, make sure you're chasing with the captain that's on the captaincy on the guy that's the lesser owned, and that's going to be Hogue or McCall. And those are going to be the 2 to chase with, because Miller is so highly owned. He's going to be the number 1 captain option for sure. And Adams probably not going to be too far behind him as well. So I would chase with those other 2, or try and keep up with the pack, or keep your high ranking with a Miller. Probably I would go for. When we're having a look at the community, geez, we're going pretty well in the SC Hub community for the NBL. Round 9, we had Toby's Troops at 11 overall rank at the end. Giddy to play.
Massive
Oscar
round.
Huge. Giddy to play has been killing it. Oscar's at rank 30. Alex is coming to 96 with his team Rock Harden, and Giddy's disciples Dylan are up to 124. We've got 3 in the top 100 and 22 in the top 1,000, and the top scores of the round. Dylan with Giddy's disciples, that's what got his charge up to 124, and Kane Anderson, SuperCoach Hub godfather himself, Dr. Kando, 506, second or equal best point scoring for the round. So almost 100 points better than me. So that's pretty good. But we've got some questions here, Chad, from the community. Yep. And I'm going to fire away, and I'll go to you first on them. So first one from Pistol. How many doubles do we need in our team this week? Playing Lamb, PJC, Source on a single game? Question mark. So, over to you. How many double players do you reckon that we need this week at a minimum?
This week being such a shallow pool of doubles, we only have 2 teams on it, and as we brought up, that center spot, there's not many options just screaming out. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that have 3 to 4 on the double and then solid pieces on the single, or conversely, there'll be teams that have 4 or 5 that are on the double, but it's going to be guys like a Bullquall, a Wardenberg that aren't necessarily ceiling guys. If you've got, say, the 2 Cairns boys and one of the Sydney guys, you could have singles in those other spots, whether you're going early on a Source Williams, or say you had McCall in your forward spot and you had someone like a PJC or a Cotton as your other guard. You could get away with it this week. But yeah, if you want to be really, really aggressive, that's where we probably look to bring in, say, 2 Sydney guys and put them with 3 Cairns guys to have a full team of doubles.
Yeah, I think for me, if I'm just looking at the starting lineup, you want 3 starters on doubles. And that's, I think, my minimum. I think 4 is good. I probably wouldn't even go 5, to be honest. I think 5 is probably too aggressive with the teams that are on the doubles. As far as your starters, obviously, we're going to have some on the bench. So for Pistol, he's playing Lamb, PJC, and Source. I would probably say, Pistol, that you can start, say, Lamb and Source. You're always going to start Source. And those 3 other starting spots, I reckon that he needs to have double game players in.
Yeah, if he doesn't have someone even like a Jalen Adams, it's you make 13. I think it's 13,000 or 17,000 going from PJC down to Jalen Adams. So you make a little bit of cash and you get someone else on the double. And if that takes it to 3 doubles, Lamb and Source, who are probably the 2 best scorers in the game, that's definitely a solid starting lineup this week.
100%. That was a good question. Now we've got another one. So we've got. Missing the questions here.
I did have it up just before. Oh, yeah. So I got this one from Alex. I did see that one. So I'll fire this one at you then. Sell Cotton to fund McCall and Adams. Would you do that for Alex?
Oh, Alex, that's a good one. I got Cotton egg all over me because I didn't think that he was going to have last week's game, but then Jalen Adams turned up and moved out of his way the whole game. If he's getting Adams and McCall by getting rid of Cotton, you got to do it. If it was just Cotton to say, and Adams, it would be a lot more debatable. But to get McCall and Adams, it's a no-brainer for me. I reckon that you have to do it, Chad.
Yeah, 100% agree. If it's both, then massive tick. If it's McCall, it's still a tick, especially with the schedule coming up. McCall got the 4 doubles. Cotton has 1 in the next 4 weeks. I know Cotton has shown why he was the best player last year for scoring. But yeah, the Cotton has to do that essentially or better every single week, probably to get anywhere near McCall. So if it's McCall, yes. If it's both of them, big yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that everyone's looking at the Illawarra lineup, and I don't want to, hound you as a Hawks fan, but Perth has got the Illawarra game this week, and I think that's got it's got a Cotton 50 single game week written all over it. So I think that's the issue. But surely Adams and McCall are going to outscore that, and even singly. I reckon there's an argument to not go to an Adams. But I don't think there can be for McCall. If you need that money to fund McCall coming in, then you just do it because even if you go to next week, Perth played home, but they're playing against Tassie, and that's not great for them. So, yeah, I reckon. Did you have any other community questions there?
Then there was one. I only wrote this one down, so I can't shout out who wrote it in. Sorry, but that's from the community too, which was bring in Roberts this week or wait a week with all the Kings options, which is a very good question. What are your thoughts on that, Barnesy?
Yeah,
we did touch on it, but
yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit. I think it could go either way. I don't think Roberts is a must-have this week. I think you can wait until next week. And I think probably to answer the question, we're going to go team specific again, right? Like if you're chasing or you don't have any doubles in your team, or you've only got 2 doubles, then get to that 3 or 4 double starters as a minimum, and forget about Roberts until next week. That's probably what I'd be doing. But if you've already got, say, 3 guys on doubles, maybe get your 4th guy and get Roberts in this week, and I reckon that's a good scenario.
Yeah, especially if it was like, I don't know if this is the exact scenario, but it could be like someone like a Bannon to Roberts, who is either not going to play at all or is going to play very little and probably drop cash. You're going to make well over $100,000 and get to, well, if Roberts plays like he did last week, then you can get 2 good games, cash gen, and a solid score.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Chad, that's going to wrap up the SC Hub NBL Round 10 episode for this week. Thanks very much for jumping on the Fantasy Phoenix, everybody. Go and give him a follow because he's got sage advice, and we'll talk about the Hawks in depth as well, even though they're not winning very many games. He's still a super fan, and he's still a great super coach to chat to. So thank you very much, Chad.
Thank you very much for having me again, Barnesy. A pleasure as always. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Definitely get you on again soon, mate. And anyone that wants to follow me, you can get me at NRL_SC_All-Stars on Twitter. You can also follow that podcast as well with our NRL content starting to ramp up. But for the SC Hub, make sure you jump on Discord. You can get into the community there and chat to everybody and throw some questions around. It always helps with the SuperCoach. And make sure you subscribe to these episodes as well. You can do that on YouTube, on the SC Hub YouTube channel. You can also do so on Spotify if you just like to hear us. And we are out every single Wednesday to get your NBL SuperCoach covered for you. But until then, good luck with your trades this week. Good luck with your round 10. We will be back next week with another episode, and we'll chat to you again real soon.